It was drizzling with light rain outside. Dusk was falling on the city, and there were fewer and fewer people around. There was almost no passerby on the road leading to the 7-story hospital building, and only one young woman was almost running, afraid that she would be late for work. She flew into the intensive care unit just 5 minutes before starting her shift, and immediately heard the doctor's voice. "Felicia, hurry up! Get changed quickly! You'll help!" shouted Dr. Harris at her. "We've got poisoning and cardiac arrest here. This girl swallowed some kind of junk, apparently because of unrequited love. Okay, not for the first time. We'll save her." A minute later, Felicia was already standing next to Dr. Harris, actively helping him to save the woman's life. Just a week before, Sandra, whose life was now being fought for by the doctor in the intensive care unit, could be called the happiest woman in the world. She thought to herself, because she had everything for happiness: a huge house where she was living with her parents, and an excellent education, and most importantly, her wedding with the best man in the world was about to take place. Sandra's parents were good people. They had a successful business, and so the girl had everything she could only dream of. But she was not spoiled, and grew up a modest and decent woman. Since childhood, she avoided bad companies, preferring instead a music school, where she was studying the violin. Sandra's parents have never had such problems with their daughter, as most of their friends, long tired of the behaviour of their ungrateful heirs. Those only knew how to live carelessly at their own pleasure, using their parents' money, demanding more and more, giving nothing in return, and not thinking about their future. But Sandra was completely different. She loved music, and already in high school she performed in various music competitions and participated in charity concerts. She not only found a friend in music school, but also met her true love. She and Felicia had been friends for a few years, but then their communication stopped abruptly when Felicia quit music and moved to another city. But Sandra's love for Edgar, unlike friendship with Felicia, turned out to be really sincere, heartfelt and long. Edgar was a quiet, modest pianist from a low-income family. Sandra met him in the last grade of music school. He had just moved with his parents from a small town and came to study at their school. At first they were just friends, but Edgar was happy even about that, because he could not imagine that such a rich and beautiful girl could fall in love with him. He loved her secretly, hiding his bright feelings for a long time, until one romantic incident pushed him to confess. Sandra and Edgar were returning from a joint performance at a charity concert when the bus suddenly broke down. The girl did not call her father to meet her because it was close to home, and the road went through an amazingly beautiful promenade. The young people walked along the river, where the moon and the stars were reflected, and Edgar felt that he could no longer keep silent. He took Sandra's hand and confessed his feelings to her. To his surprise and incredible joy, she reciprocated his feelings. This was the beginning of their relationship, which grew stronger every day. And although from the outside it might have seemed to many that the guy's goals were mercenary, time has shown that these suspicions were unfounded. During the 5 years of their relationship, Edgar never took a cent from Sandra. They both managed to graduate from college, get a job, and left the passion for music for the soul, sometimes taking part in charity concerts. Time passed, their wedding day was approaching, but before that, another important event was scheduled: a reunion of music school graduates. Felicia, the same nurse from the intensive care unit, also received an invitation to the evening, even though she had long ago given up playing the violin, considering it a waste of time. Her mother thought no one needed musicians, unlike nurses, and convinced her daughter to go to medical school. Felicia's mother was never enthusiastic, about her daughter's friendship with Sandra as well. She thought she was a rich, feisty girl who would hurt her simple daughter occasionally, but Felicia was friends to Sandra for personal profit. Sandra always had a lot of pocket money, so Felicia always took advantage of it shamelessly, getting from her responsive friend everything that was usually out of her reach, from good food to clothes and cosmetics. But Sandra didn't notice. She thought of Felicia as her best friend and did everything in her power to help her. This friendship lasted until Edgar came along. Felicia immediately liked this reserved young man, probably because she herself had always been a cheerful and active girl, and opposites, as you know, always attract. Felicia was seriously infatuated with Edgar, following him everywhere and even threatening to hurt herself if he didn't agree to go out with her. But all was to no avail. Edgar was madly in love with Sandra, and after they began dating, the friendship between the girls gradually ended. Felicia was furious at how masterfully her former friend managed to steal her boyfriend. Outwardly, she tried not to show how hard it was for her, but every day at home the girl had real hysterics, with breaking of dishes, screaming, and tears. Felicia ended up going crazy with unrequited love, and one day decided to end her life by jumping into the river from a high bridge. Luckily, the girl was saved by a passing fisherman. Felicia's mother made sure no one knew what had happened, otherwise her daughter's admission to medical school would have been highly problematic. Thanks to a doctor she knew, she managed to get some powerful remedies and put the girl back on track. Felicia left the city and went to college. Once she stopped seeing her former best friend and her boyfriend, she gradually forgot about them. After graduation, Felicia returned home and got a job as a nurse in the intensive care department of the local hospital, and she simply had no time left for reflections. But fate itself soon threw her a real test, which instantly awakened Felicia's hatred of other people's happiness. Sandra saw her school friend, whom she hadn't seen for several years, and she was delighted. "Hello, Felicia, how nice to see you," exclaimed Sandra, hugging her. "I was beginning to think we'd never see each other again. Where have you gone? By the way, Edgar and I have a wedding soon, and we're inviting you," said Sandra joyfully, not noticing how much the look on Felicia's face changed at that moment. She was looking at Sandra with a detached, unblinking look, and her anger was bubbling up inside her. Felicia was ready to immediately strangle her hated rival, but suddenly a smile lit up on her face, her soul became light and happy, and Felicia firmly hugged Sandra, wishing her happiness. They spent the whole evening together talking about everything and agreed to meet the next day in the park. When they met again, Felicia's cunning and cruel plan had already matured in her mind, and she immediately put it into action. Felicia was talking merrily with her friend, leading her away to a deserted part of the park. The severe illness, which Felicia had been fighting all this time with the help of strong medication, worsened at the very moment when she saw her former friend again, and left no chance for poor Sandra. When they were near the overgrown pond, Sandra felt a light prick in her neck and at the same moment lost consciousness. A distraught Felicia tried to push her into the water, but she didn't have the strength, and she left the poor woman to die on the bank and hurried to the hospital. It seemed to her that she had calculated everything correctly, and the poison, which should have stopped the girl's heart, would soon work. But if not, she would be taken to the very hospital where Felicia was working, and there she would finish the job so that no one would suspect anything. And so it happened. Sandra was found by a homeless man and called an ambulance, which arrived in time, and the woman ended up in intensive care. Sandra came to, and, barely opening her eyes, saw Felicia next to her. She was hovering over her, her face twisted in anger and her eyes burning with hatred. "Well, you survived after all. Yes, our doctor is a real professional," she hissed with hatred. "How I hate you. You always had everything, thanks to your parents. But you also decided to steal my Edgar. But now no one else will help you. Say goodbye to life." Hearing this, Sandra froze in horror. The woman only now realized that all these years her friend had hated her, and she understood why she had disappeared so suddenly from her life, which apparently had come to an end. Looking at Felicia, approaching with a pillow, Sandra squeezed her eyes shut in horror and prepared to die. But suddenly she heard a noise, and when she opened her eyes, she saw Felicia thrown by Edgar's strong arms into the corner of the ward, shouting curses and trying to pounce on the man. With a few swift movements, he twisted her arms and held her until the hospital staff came to help him. A month passed. Felicia was finally put where she should have been years ago, in a hospital for the mentally ill. Edgar and Sandra's wedding had to be postponed until the bride had finally recovered from the attack. But time passes unnoticed for the lovers, and finally the long-awaited wedding day has come. The young people swore to each other in eternal love and fidelity, which none of them doubted, and most importantly, no one stood in the way of their absolute happiness any more.